Thanks. Yeah, I will be continuing on some of that same theme. But I think there is a myth that everyone listens in a non-linear fashion now. We had Martin Lewis in that same chair earlier this week. He said he would always go for an ITV show where he can get millions of people sitting down in real time watching that thing than go on Netflix or something where it's a much more diffuse audience. So I would refute that suddenly everyone's gone non-linear and the old cathode ray tube or whatever wireless doesn't function anymore. So yeah, I wanted to sort of ask you further on this point about the minority audiences. Would you accept, it's in an editorial in the Voice newspaper today, that the corporation's proposed budget cuts disproportionately hit black and Asian audiences and journalists because both are being effectively axed here?
No, I don't think there's any evidence for that. I think that we've been very clear that we want to maintain our commitment to community programming. In making the changes across local radio, we have commitments to consider equality considerations as we make those changes. So I don't see any evidence whatsoever that there will be any disproportionate impact on any community group or any ethnic group.
These sort of slightly, I don't know, they could be seen as niche, but a lot of people, I mean, we've all had a lot of emails from people. I've had journalists as well who do phone-in shows of an evening on the weekend, and they know who the regular callers are. I've had people who listen to those who love listening to whoever going on about the Clapham omnibus. You're not going to get that if 39 local shows are merged into 6 amorphous blob regions, as Simon Jock was pointing out, with this huge...
We're not merging in 6 regions. I mean, I think there are a few... Look, I understand why individual presenters and individual colleagues would be reaching out to elected members, given the nature of the proposals that are on the table. But just to echo what Jason said, we are committed to maintaining our community programming. Doesn't mean it won't change, because all programming evolves, but we're committed to maintaining it. I would say that the biggest shift that I've seen on local radio in the last 2 or 3 years is to make sure that the diverse communities and different ethnic minority issues are reflected across our output. You know, when I worked in local radio 15, 20 years ago, those types of programs sort of sat hermetically sealed at 7 or 8 in the evening, and
they
it
have
didn't.
A huge followership. My mum used to love. I think she used to keep the radio on. There was an Asian show, then
right.
There was one called Rice and Peas for Caribbean people afterwards.
That's right.
And she would keep the radio on, and she was getting quite into reggae. Which is unusual for her demographic.
I think they are important, but I think it's equally important.
They're loved by people, millions of people across the country, and you know, as Jane was pointing out, these may be of an older demographic, but
just to echo again, we don't propose to reduce our commitment to community programming.
Okay, so the rumours that all these shows are going to be merged into a single programme available on BBC Sounds, can you refute that?
I can deny that. Well, not only refute it, but deny it. I mean, there is just... What would be the benefit for the BBC in doing that? I can't understand quite how that rumour developed, because how could you begin to merge all of those programmes into a single podcast? So... I'm not saying there won't be podcasts or on-demand content into the future, but we have to recognise that we uniquely are already connecting with audiences that other broadcasters don't. We want to maintain that. I think what we're saying is, can we think about how we do that in a more effective way, given the fact that we're in the 21st century, people have more access to technology, yet still maintain that really core linear base. I think I would also just say on this point that, I mean, Rodri's right about the representation of those programmes and that content across our airwaves. But what I'm really proud of in the last couple of years across local radio is how people from those communities are now presenting some of our mainstream programming, and they're doing a fantastic job. So I listen to London, I hear Salma on Breakfast, or I listen to WM, and I hear Rakeem on Breakfast. These are people who were not presenting those programmes a year ago. And I think it's really important that actually it's not just within the community programmes that we provide at certain points of the week that those communities are represented, but that actually those communities are represented and portrayed across all of our output.
You can give us a cast iron guarantee that these Black and Asian shows will continue in their current format?
No,
I didn't say that.
Not be shunted off to BBC Sounds?
No, I mean, Dr. Huq, what I said was there is going to be no single podcast reflecting all of those community programmes.
How many will there be? Because,
and that's what we're working
Leicester,
with.
Lancashire, London, they all need their
Sure, and that's why we are pulling together the group of presenters and producers to talk about how we can best develop that output across both linear and on-demand services, and that work starts next week.
And just to be really clear, we will maintain our commitment to community programming. We will maintain our investment in community programming. But what I can't give you, because everything changes all the time, is that the exact way that we currently deliver will be maintained into the future, because no broadcast service stands still, and programming evolves. But we'll talk to our programme teams, and then we will make a decision as to what the right shape should be.
And I think people listening in will want to see more clarity of how meaningful that commitment is, what are the terms of it, because you're just saying it will be the...
But Dr. Huq, sorry, forgive me, I think what's really important is that we talk this through with our teams first, and we're going to do that, and then we'll come back.
I mean, there's a case for actually increasing these sort of things. You mentioned talent streams of people coming through for the future. I mean, the Lenny Henry Centre for Media Diversity did a report last year called Diversity of Senior Leaders in BBC Radio News. It was a damning indictment of ethnic representation in the corporation. 6% local BBC leadership within, and 8% across the entire news and current affairs. I mean, how are these proposed cuts going to help that?
Look, I think that in terms of leadership, both at a senior leader level and at an editor level, we've much further to go. But we're making really important strides in that direction. And I think the fact that we have vacancies for 11 senior editorial jobs across BBC local services at the moment, I would very much want to see the diversity of those leaders change, and we are more representative around all of our leadership tables from all of the communities that we serve. In going back to your question about communities and how we serve them and making sure that the representation is right, we've run several new voices schemes across the last few years to make sure that we get talent from all of the communities that we serve into both on-air and off-air positions. We run a huge apprenticeship scheme across the whole of local services that, again, we are absolutely trying to attract diversity in all of its forms, ethnicity, socioeconomic, and so on. And we've got a really good pipeline, I think, of people from a cross-section of society. And we remain committed to things like New Voices, where it's running at the moment, and also to the apprenticeship scheme as well.
I mean, there's a very powerful letter by Black Equity Organisation. I don't know if it's reached your desk yet.
Yeah, we've seen it.
It's signed by a quite impressive array of people, not just the normal lords, ladies and gentlemen, but, international figures like David Harewood and Adrian Lester. And, they point out that black people don't have a dedicated national broadcast channel, as do other, like there's Bengali channels and things you can get on a satellite. That's 3.2 million people being disenfranchised here. And it says in Clause 14 of your own charter that you're going to reflect the diverse communities of the whole of the United Kingdom and ensure output meets the diverse communities of the UK. I mean, it just feels like this butchery is not doing that at all.
Sorry, which butchery?
The fact that you're going to this amorphous blob with nothing at the weekend.
Well, we're not, are we? No. I mean, I think we've tried to explain.
You're not being clear on what is happening. It's consulting.
So we've been clear that our commitment to community programming, in terms of the investment we put into community programming.
You can't say it's all going to BBC Sounds. I tried to say.
No, we'll continue to maintain our investment in community programming on local radio, but we have opportunities with BBC Sounds to also reach different audiences that come to our online services from Black and Asian groups, and we should take that opportunity. But in terms of, you're asking for very specific programme plans, we would share those with staff first once we've made the right editorial decisions. I do understand the frustration of some staff because they want specifics on particular programme proposals. But clearly, when you're making a strategic change at this level, you need to set out the overarching plan first before you can get into programme-by-programme decisions on individual stations.
I mean, I'd hope you can address the fact for the second year in a row there's not a single black person employed in a leadership role in the BBC production sector. And just last thing I want to ask is on...
Sorry, I don't understand that.
It's from your own report. Not a single black person employed in a leadership role in the BBC's production sector.
That's just not true.
I can give you the link.
That's fine. We'll
look
at that. But that's, I mean, just to be clear, across the BBC today...
on your board, how many are there?
From black and Asian background. I come back to you, I think there are 2.
Of a board of how many?
12, but let me come back to you in writing on that.
And the last one I wanted to ask you about is actually your own figures of audience satisfaction. Your own figures show that only 47% of BAME audiences think the BBC is effective at reflecting people like them, and 27% think the broadcaster is not representing them well. I think the other side of this, I'd hope to see these figures would have improved massively. And just, I think, by diluting all these shows, it's going to go
I would say that if you look across BBC services over the last 4 or 5 years, there has been an absolute step change in our representation of black and Asian communities across our output. If you look at BBC Drama today and just go on to iPlayer and look at the breadth of that coverage and the role of black and Asian actors across that portfolio and slate, I would say there's been a huge advance. Of course there's more to do. Tim Davey, the Director General, has been very clear on our targets on ethnicity, that 20% of our staff base in 3 years' time should come from black, Asian or minority ethnic background, and we're making good progress on that. So I always accept the criticism, there's always more that we could learn, but I do think the BBC is setting the pace on driving greater representation from diverse communities across our output.
And you will reply to that open letter as well?
Of course, we reply to all the correspondence we get. Yeah.
Thank you.
And that specific point on production representation, if you could get that, because that's not the world that I experience at the BBC.
Thank you. Kevin Brennan.